So, the first question was, tell me about yourself.
My name is Rachel. I am from Northern New Jersey, and I'm a student here at NC State. I am an animal science major, and I'm happy to be here.
My name is Gabby Worley. I'm also going to NC State University, and I'm also majoring in animal science. And I am from a very small town located at the bottom of the mountains called Lenore. It's a very rich agricultural community, and I hope to one day be able to go back and help service my community.
How much time do you spend on average studying?
I spend a lot of time on studying, and it depends on the class, but most of the time I spend the same amount in class or even more studying for that class.
I spend a pretty decent amount of time studying. I'd say it depends on the class and whether or not it's a difficulty for me, and I have to spend more time understanding it if it's more intricate and detailed, but pretty long time.
In your vet experience, what is the most difficult situation you faced and how did you deal with it?
There was a time when I was shadowing, and one of the animals that was waiting in the waiting room got loose from its owner, and the vet had the door open to another waiting room, and the animal was loose, and we had to catch it before it got into trouble with anybody else.
One time we had a patient, it was a cat, and she was just getting a routine dental, but she had a really hard time waking up from the anesthesia, and it was my first time having an animal not immediately wake up like normal, so we had to get a bunch of blankets out and get her really warm, and it was just eye-opening.
Have you ever messed up on a call or a case where you were helping with, and how did you and the veterinarian respond?
I was helping to clip a dog's toenails, and I cut the toenail a little too short, and the vet told me that it was okay, but not to cut it too short again. So then he let me do the next nail, and that one I didn't do too short, so then I learned how.
One time I was trying to get vaccines for a cat, and vaccine names are very similar, and I accidentally got one for a dog instead, and I had dosed it for the cat even though it was the dog. So I went up there, and my vet was very considerate, and she said it's okay, but we all have to learn. So I learned and went back and got the right one.
What is the difference between animal rights and animal welfare?
Animal rights are the basic rights that an animal should have, not to be abused, to be fed. Where animal welfare is kind of putting those into place and making sure that the animals are getting what they need, but also going a little above and beyond that.
I'd say the animal rights are the basic rights of animals, and that they have to live, and the right to not be abused. And then animal welfare is their conditions and the following through those rights and how those animals are actually treated.
As a vet school professor, how would you approach a student who is avidly against learning surgery techniques on a live animal?
I would talk to the student and ask her or him why, and try to understand their issues with it and see if there's a problem that can be fixed. But if they're just totally against it, then I would tell them that they kind of have to do it, because in real life, when they have their own practice, that's what they're going to be doing every day. So they have to learn how to do it properly on a live animal.
Yeah, I would want to understand their point of view as to why they don't want to do it, but I would also explain to them that this is something that they're going to have to do every day, as it's a part of being a vet.
What would you tell someone in government if you were trying to raise funds for animal support or animal research?
Well, for animal support, I would talk to them about their own animals and, ask them, wouldn't you want better for your own pets, as everybody else does too. And then for research, I would explain to them how it could help humans also, and how if we can treat many zoonotic diseases, that the world would be a safer place.
For animal support, I would tell them that the animals have no way of communicating that they need that they need money, and like they can't fundraise for themselves, so somebody has to help them at some point. And also, for animal research, I would say that the findings from animal research can go on to help cure human diseases and also help improve the food industry.
What are some challenges facing veterinary medicine at the state, national, and international levels?
At the state, we have several different issues, like with getting all the animals vaccinated and only having rabies as a required shot, where I feel like distemper and stuff like that should be also required. For national, we have a national shortage of large animal vets, and that's how we get our food, and so that's a very important part of our society that needs to, like, we need to have more learning and education about that. And nationally, all the vet schools have different, like, time periods and different types of training. I think that we should all come together and, like, all have, like, a set and certified way that everybody should be trained.
On the state level, there's a lot of animals in communities that aren't registered with their town, so they don't always get the vaccines that they need, which leaves them vulnerable to getting diseases. And on the national level, there's not very many vet schools in the U.S., so that minimizes the number of vets that can be produced. And there's also concerns of zoos and their conditions, and like SeaWorld has had issues with their whales. Internationally, a lot of people have to go to the vet schools that are outside of the U.S., so I think if we could work together with that, that would be a lot better.
How do you plan on dealing with the expenses associated with vet school?
I will constantly be working, as I've started working at a local veterinary clinic. So I will be working there and hopefully other places as well to start saving up money. I will also take out loans, as most everyone else does, and I will also apply for almost every scholarship that I can find.
I'll be working multiple jobs and saving up, and also taking out loans and applying to scholarships.
How will you decide which veterinarian school to attend?
Mostly like financial reasons, and that's why I would choose NC State, as it's my local in-state veterinary school, so it will have the lowest tuition.
I would base it off of financial needs and whether or not there's no vet school for in-state for New Jersey. So if the school offers the in-state tuition after a year, that would be very important to me as well. Yeah.
Describe a difficult or sad case and an uplifting case that you have worked with. How did you respond to each?
One of the saddest cases that I worked with is when a stray dog came in, and they thought it was a puppy, but it turned out to be very old and geriatric, probably around 15 years. We had to pull out almost all of its teeth, and it was already blind anyway. So, and it didn't have a home, so I was just thinking about how difficult that would be to get adopted. Any uplifting case, there's several that come in. Anytime like a little old lady comes in with all her little cats and she has all these little questions about them, and then you tell her, that everything's okay, those are always good.
One of the sad cases was at the shelter that I volunteer at, and there's this one cat who was very arthritic and did not like coming out of his cage because it was very painful for him to move around, and he had been in the shelter for several years. He was one of the longest cats that had been there, and no one was looking to adopt him. And one of the uplifting cases was when there were puppies born, I guess.
How do you define diversity and inclusion, and what makes you a diverse applicant?
Diversity is just bringing different things and different experiences to your college, and then inclusion is putting all those together and making a very good like mixing pot so everyone can learn from everyone else's cultures and personal experiences. And I would say that I'm diverse from my different backgrounds and from the small rural community I come from.
I would say that diversity is diversity is coming from different backgrounds and having different experiences, and then inclusion would be bringing all those people with different experiences together and sharing those experiences and learning from them. And I'm diverse because of the northern background I have.
What are the other careers that you could have besides working in private practice?
I could be a research veterinarian and work like with the CDC and try to prevent diseases from spreading. You could also work with like the Army and work with all the animals that they have there. There's many different things that veterinarians can do other than private practice.
You could work within the government as like FDA and help improve the food industry, and also work and help become an animal welfare worker and try and improve the conditions for all animals, and also do research and work with the government and try to improve the laws that animals have.
How would you deal with a scenario in which one of your coworkers had falsified important medical records?
I would confront them and ask them why they did it and what the actual records were, and then I would tell the boss about it, or if I'm the boss, then fire them.
I would confront them and ask them why they're doing this and see like maybe if they do have a reason. I would also tell the boss and let him deal with it, and if it comes down to it, I would contact the authorities.
What are the pros and cons of social media in veterinary medicine?
A pro is that you can spread education and record surgeries and cases and spread them through social media, and people can learn from them. A con would be maybe people taking advantage of social media and thinking that they could do things for their pets on their own because they watched a video about it and they're not treating their animal properly.
I think there's several pros for social media. I know that I follow several veterinarians on Instagram and YouTube, and I love to watch them, and like they've taught me a lot, and it's just interesting to watch, and it spreads like what veterinarians actually do, and it like educates the public. And some cons are there's always people that are against even animals having surgery. Like some people believe that animals should just be left alone. And you can always have people that think that they know how to do it now because they watched a video about it. So,
What does integrity mean to you? Describe a time in which one of your peers did not demonstrate good integrity and what you did to remedy the situation.
To me, integrity means being honest and hardworking and trustworthy. And there was a time in one of my classes where my classmate had not finished their homework, and they asked me for some of the problems and the answers to them, and I did not give them the answers because they didn't do the work.
I had a problem in English where we were supposed to peer review each other's papers, and the guy's paper I was supposed to peer review did not turn it in. So, and that means that he also didn't get to peer review mine, so I didn't have a peer reviewed draft. So I went and talked to my teacher about it, and she just told me that she would assign me someone else.
How do you deal with stress?
So I recently started running again. Through high school, I ran. Both my parents did half marathons and trained for stuff. But I'm currently taking a run conditioning class for credit, and then it's become a time for me to get away from everything. So when I'm stressed, I typically try to go to the gym or take my mind off of it. I also ride horses, so I'll go to the barn and spend time with my horse. I try to do something that I can control and I can have feasible reward from it almost immediately, and it makes me feel better, and it feels more like I have something going for me even when something else seems to be overbearing.
I deal with stress by just like removing myself from what's stressing me out. So if it's like schoolwork or, you know, like a relationship or something, I just try to hang out with my friends, and that really helps me because it gets my mind off what I'm stressed about, and I can, you know, have fun and laugh and, you know, go play soccer or just do something that takes my mind off of it.
Who do you turn to if you are stressed?
My mom. She's always the first person that I call. We have a really good relationship. She's very supportive of me. She's been through a lot of schooling, so she understands how it is. She always is there to either offer some suggestions or just listen to me rant about a bad day that I had. She always does. She makes me feel better, and it's nice to have kind of a calm in the storm. Since she's been through it, it gives me hope that I can get through whatever is stressing me out.
I also go to my mom. It's a little bit harder whenever I'm away from her just because I can't really talk to her like face to face. So usually at school, I talk to I have a few close friends that I can work through it with and figure out, you know, what I need to do.
What type of large animal experience do you have?
I have some experience with the 4-H Dairy Steer project that I was a participant in. You get a 1-day-old calf from a dairy farm, and it's a bull, and you bottle feed it for 2 months and halter break it and just take care of it for about 8 months, and then that's around fair time, and you get to show it at the fair in a special show, and then at the end of the program you have to sell the calves. And it really showed me that I want to be a large animal vet, just because I really enjoy the cows, specifically, you know, beef cows, and just working with them like showed me that I have a passion for doing that kind of work.
So I have a variety of large animal experiences. I started riding horses when I was 8 years old. So I've constantly been around the barn, working, doing things. I was camp counselor at a camp, taught people how to ride. And then coming to state, I didn't really have, before college, I didn't have much large animal experience as far as cattle go or, you know, in that nature of things. And I worked on the dairy farm here at NC State last summer, and I also worked on the swine unit, and then I will be having an internship with Prestige Farms this summer.
Have you ever castrated an animal?
I have. I was a freshman, and I was taking my first animal science course, and I was actually in the class with a bunch of sophomores and juniors because it was like an upper level class, and we went out to this farm, and there were only like a handful of bulls, so I didn't think I was going to be doing it, but my teacher was like, all right, Abigail, you're up. So I was like, well, I mean, it can't be too bad. He wouldn't make me do if it wasn't that bad. So they were big too. They were not like, they were bigger than they should have been. And so like the guys were like holding the cow, and he was like, all right, do it. So I just did it, and it was fine. And I was like, wow, you know, like if I can do that, I can do anything.
So as part of my job at the swine unit last summer, castration of the male piglets is done. So I probably castrated a couple hundred, even more pigs over the course of my time there. It happens during the processing weeks. So yes, my fair share of castration.
What do you think of the roles both men and women play in business today?
I think it's interesting because like a lot of the older vets I know are men, but you know when you get into animal science, most of the people that are trying to be vets are women. So I think it's really important for there to be a balance because we do have different perspectives on things. I do believe that, and so I think it's important to have, you know, lots of different people with different abilities to be in the field. So I think we do need a little bit more of a balance, but I think both are equally important.
I think there's still definitely a stigma between men are supposed to be the business leaders and women are supposed to be the workers. I think that a lot of that has been changing, and I think that's something that still needs to be changed within our society. I do see a lot more women business owners, but it's still rare sometimes. Personally, my first job was at a small animal clinic. The man who hired me was the manager at that time, and then he ended up leaving and we got a female manager, and so I got to see both sides of being managed by both male and female, and the repertoire between us was different, the two different managers. So I think that the women's role is changing, and I think that it probably needs to change more. I think that as it becomes more normal for women to be the manager, to be the owner, it'll be more even, as she discussed, but as of right now, I think there's still definitely the man's world in business, but to be changing, especially since all of the up-and-coming veterinarians, not all, but most, are female, so.
What do you think of euthanasia?
I think euthanasia is a wonderful tool that veterinarians have. My mother, who has been very influential in my life, she actually does human medicine, so she's a nurse anesthetist, so she does anesthesia, and just talking with her about the human side of things, it's not, you're not allowed to euthanize humans, and just the stories that I've heard of some people suffering for a long time really was sad, when they would have just been happier or been better. The quality of life just wasn't good, and I think that it's a huge tool that veterinarians have, that we can end suffering and undo suffering. I have seen like a lot of animals just within my years of experience in the field that really should not have been kept alive and should have been euthanized, and I think that it's a humbling thing to do, and it is very sad, and it should not be taken lightly, but I think it's one of the best tools that we have.
I also believe it's an important tool. You don't want animals suffering just because they're there for your, you know, emotional support and you want them to be alive. Like, they should be, if they're in that bad of a situation, then it's a good tool to have. I also think that I know people just turn in perfectly healthy animals that they want euthanized because they don't want to take care of them anymore. Or in my companion animal class, we learned about how purebred dogs, like a lot of them that are born without qualities that are like very like strictly important for that breed, are turned over to be euthanized. And I think it's important that we only use it whenever it is specifically needed, and not just because we don't want to deal with an animal anymore.
What effect will global warming have on veterinary medicine?
Global warming will have a huge effect on veterinary medicine. Well, veterinary medicine's scope goes far beyond animals. It goes far beyond just your daily dog, cat, horse, cow, pig. I think the most kind of obvious off the top answer would be, in Antarctica with the polar bears or the polar bears are in Antarctica. But just the species that are in colder regions with the warming, having to deal with that. But I think global warming's effect on natural disasters and increased weather patterns, we've seen that within the United States thus far with all the hurricanes that have recently come through. It's not only people who are affected by these hurricanes, it's the animals too. Like, what do you do with your horse when there's a hurricane? What do you do with cows? That was a huge problem that come up. And that's a problem that veterinarians need to work through, and we're going to be seeing more natural disasters happening, and with that, more homeless pets, and then more pets not be having access to veterinary care because, if you don't have a veterinary office because the hurricane blew it down, then you don't have veterinary care provided to those animals in that region, and then they're not vaccinated anymore, and then zoonotic diseases come through. So global warming will have far more effect on our profession than I think we even know of right now.
From a food animal veterinarian standpoint, it will have a large effect because, as regions become warmer, maybe we'll be able to have certain animals in places where we couldn't have them before, and also just in general, as it gets warmer, mosquitoes and other vector carrying insects might have larger regions where they can come, so we may be affected by diseases that we haven't had to deal with before. And it's kind of like if it's in another area, it's not really our problem here in the US, but we might have a lot of diseases that we would have to deal with, and a lot of those are zoonotic and can be transferred to humans, so we'll be the first, on the front lines of that kind of thing.
What will you do if you don't get into vet school?
Try again. If I don't get into vet school on the first try, I will probably I will get a job in the vet field somewhere, whether it be in my interest is food animal, specifically swine. I would probably try to get some kind of job there, maybe start pursuing a master's or a PhD program, as I wouldn't be opposed to eventually one day becoming a professor. So I would need a PhD, but I would look through my application, see what needed to be strengthened, work on strengthening those, and then reapply the next cycle.
I would do a similar thing, definitely get a job working with an area that I may not have had as much experience in. Just reapplying the next year and trying to strengthen myself as an applicant so that I will be a good candidate once I do get into vet school, hopefully.
Name a time you failed and how you responded to it.
I failed many times. I think that's probably a common process, especially in college. When I do fail, so say I did not do so well on my first Organic 2 test this semester, and in my eyes it was a failure because I had much higher expectations. I went to my professor's office hours and talked with him about it. I went and talked with my tutor. I talked to my mom. I met with other professors on what I should do. So I try to be proactive, but then whenever I do fail and have to go into a reactive mode, I see what I did wrong. I see how I can fix it. I learn best through failure. If I get a question wrong on a test, I will learn that, I will know that. I will never have that question wrong again. So that's usually how I deal with my failures.
A time that I failed, I was in high school, and I didn't go into high school, trying to be valedictorian, but it was a very small high school, so, whenever I got my report card sophomore year and I was number 1, you know, I was like, well, I'll continue to take AP classes and try to do this. And my friend was number 2, so it was always kind of like a competition between us, you know, like friendly competition, but we were both trying to get there. And I made 1B junior year, and that was kind of like the deciding factor. It was like 0.001 maybe or something like that. But I mean, it kind of hurt because I was really wanting to do that and, you know, give a speech at graduation. But I realized, it also helped me realize that there's bigger things in life. Like, I thoroughly enjoyed my high school career, and I was balancing that with the 4-H project and FFA and soccer and tennis. So, like, I realized that sometimes you have to sacrifice things, and even if you don't do as well as you would hope, like, you have to find the balance.